State of the Nation, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta outlines his government achievements amid opposition disruptions. 5 more years, Uganda's Supreme Court upholds President Museveni's re-election and dismisses a poll petition. Zuma must pay. Embattled South African president ordered to reimburse state funds used to upgrade his private home. It is the last day of the month, and what an historic day it has been across the continent, not just here in East Africa. We'll be telling you all about the day's events as you've seen in our highlights tonight, plus that conversation on the State of the Nation, that is Kenya, following the President's State of the Nation address in the National Assembly. We'll be taking a look at it from the human rights perspective, the public policy that he talked about, from the economy to human rights to social welfare. All of those issues we will be discussing with a public policy analyst and a human rights activist, both of them in studio with me in just a moment. Welcome to our program tonight. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. I want to begin right here in Kenya, where President Uhuru Kenyatta gave his State of the Nation address earlier this evening, but he was interrupted while delivering that address by opposition MPs who were blowing whistles. He was forced to stop twice, just at the start of his speech actually, forcing both speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate to throw out a number of the opposition MPs from the court coalition. And during his speech, he had a go at people who oppose the government just for the sake of it. Here's a sneak peek at what happened in Parliament earlier today.
Honorable members, I order the Sergeant at Arms. I order the Sergeant at Arms. I order the Honorable Tom Joseph Kajwang to withdraw from the chamber. I order the Honorable Gladys Wanga to withdraw from the chamber. Honorable members, the Honorable Wandai, having refused to obey the instruction to withdraw from the chamber, I want to draw your attention to the provisions of Standing Order number 111, subsection 1, that now I have to recourse to the use of force and order that the Honorable Wandai be forcibly ejected by the Sergeant at Arms from the chamber.
Our economy is resilient at a time of global economic and financial turmoil that has seen some of the strongest performing economies in the world stumble into recession. I am glad that the macroeconomic foundation of Kenya are strong and sustainable. Our real GDP growth was 5.8% in 2015, and we expect to hit the 6% mark over the next 12 months. Inflation has remained under control, and our foreign exchange reserves have improved significantly. We all know that our dreams for decent jobs, more profitable businesses, and more taxes to pay for our health and education are dependent on a strong economy.
All right, let's talk a little bit about that conversation that took place, was an address actually by the head of state in the National Assembly today. Despite all the shenanigans, let's get into the nitty-gritty of that. And I'm joined by Joseph Kioko, who's a public policy analyst, as well as George Morara. I was about to call you Kegoro. George Morara, who's the Vice Chair of the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming. I want to start with your initial impressions. I'll start with you, George.
Well, I think reading through the 17-page speech of the president, one really reads what any government would do. It was high on its achievements, a raft of issues, what has been done in the education sector, what has been done in providing youth employment, what has been done in tackling maternal health issues. So really the standard speech that any incumbent government would give.
All right. Were you happy with it, pleased with it? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it...
I would have expected, you see, there are certain things that the president said last year in his State of the Nation address. And one of those things that he really clearly said, especially that is directly impacting on us as a nation, is our sense of nationhood. Today he kept on talking about our covenant. And I thought last year he started on a very good premise when he said, on his own behalf and on behalf of all past governments, he was giving us a clean slate to start from. But if you read today's State of the Nation address, it's like that was a one-off
But wasn't
function.
it a progression?
It wasn't a
Surely
progression.
from last year saying, you know, this is where we are as a nation, and then now talking about that nationalist covenant.
There are certain things I would have expected to see. For example, last year the president made a very definitive commitment that there will be 10 billion Kenyan shillings that will be set aside as a reparation fund.
Right.
He spoke about the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation report that was going to be discussed and implemented. For me, as a nation that is recovering from a very traumatic experience, the 2007-2008, I think I'd have expected to
So
see
you
a
wanted
report card,
a
a
follow-through
follow-up
of
on that. But I can tell
Okay.
you, Yvonne, currently, that was just made as a declaration during that State of the Nation address.
You think and it was forgotten?
It was forgotten
Okay,
because
all
there's
right.
nothing in place to show that it was followed
Okay.
through.
Kyoko?
I think it's a statement of the general weakness of this government. It has highlighted its achievement. It has made promises. It's a statement of lamentation. You've been in government 3 years. You have nothing to show for what has been done. You've consistently been blaming other institutions instead of saying, this is me as a president, this is what I can do about it. And it truly, I feel betrayed as a young person involved in public policy, involved in knowing the aspirations of the young people.
But surely there were some positives. If we just talk about, you know, some of those things like the task force on coffee, removing some of those fees and levies that he says are prohibitive, and he mandated both the Environmental Management Authority, the Communications Authority as well.
There were few gains.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, sorry for interrupting.
That's
There
all
were,
right.
there were few gains. There were few gains by and large. But in overall sense of it, look at young people aspirations. The young people who voted this government into power, what have they gotten so far as what has been pronounced today? Look at the fight against corruption. Yes, the gains in the coffee sector reforms, beautiful. I deal with coffee daily, business of mine is dealing with coffee,
Right.
and I welcome that move regarding removal of levies.
Yeah.
You'd be shocked by how much statutory deductions a coffee farmer is charged.
And he promised the same for
He
sugar,
promised the same
sugar
for sugar.
cane,
But
yes.
the promises need to go into action. This is a government that is good in pronunciation. Look at what happened last year. There should have been a comparison of saying, these are the things I talked about last year, and this is the follow-up that has been done. However, today, there's nothing to show. Like, we had a discussion last year, and we paused and stopped. Today, we've jumped into a new thing called nationalism, called about values and systems of our country.
But
there's
surely that
nothing
is
to
the
show.
role of the president, Kyoko, isn't it?
truly,
You know,
look
he's a
at this
symbol of
government.
national unity, and he's supposed to be addressing matters of national values at the State of
and
the
I
Nation.
and I do agree.
Right.
And up to a point, I fault the MPs who are booing and showing a lot of disrespect to the institution of the presidency. But it is because the avenues in which they have used to address certain issues fall flat. Today, you talk about nationalism, you talk about the values that glue this country together, but look at the appointments that come. Look at the blank check when you consistently throw to our face the question of tyranny of numbers. So here you are telling us, truly, we are a nationalist state. This is the glue that binds us together. Then tomorrow, you remind us we have the
So
tyranny
his
of
actions
numbers.
for you are not in
It's
tandem with
not in
his
tandem with
speech?
what his speech.
All right, let's talk a little bit about that somewhat new term we had today, George, alternative society. That alternative society, as the president called it, and persons like yourself and the opposition are critiquing, and he called it almost, you know, a sport rather than giving alternative solutions. He also, of course, singled out the media, talking about, you know, having that nationalist and unifying agenda. What were your thoughts on what he had to say about opposition, alternative society, and the media?
I found that a very curious labeling, actually. And if you look at the speech, it's put in quotation marks. which means that the president went out of his way to really show the other-sidedness of that alternative society. If you're talking about a State of the Nation address, national values, inclusion, non-discrimination, and all this, then you use labels and terms like that, you are sending a very strong message that almost very begrudgingly, these are people that the president has to put up with, and they're not part of the national fabric. And I think that is very unfortunate if that is the attitude. So I found the use of the word alternative society very troubling, and it actually speaks to what has been happening, especially in the so-called civil society sector, where this government in the past has been very consistent in trying to really clamp down on the space that civil society occupies. I'll give you a very quick example. In 2013, the outgoing president then, President Mwai Kibaki, signed into law the Public Benefits Organizations Act that was supposed to regulate the behavior of the so-called alternative society. Up to now, to date, that has not been passed into law. Why? Because this government is keen on looking on to ways of really trying to create space for controlling that sector. And we get very concerned and very worried when you have people with clear, serious past records like Major Ali being appointed to be the overseers of that alternative society.
I think that maybe to add a little bit more about, I think it's divisive because let's grant people and define them for who they are and the roles that they are going to play. The role of the civil society is not in doubt. The role of the opposition is not in doubt. As a president, and like you say, is a unifying factor. He's addressing all of us as Kenyans, and he's appreciating the role that you in the opposition must play, the role that the civil society must play in keeping in check all of us. Now, when you term them alternative, you've already castigated doubt on their intentions. And yes, the opposition might be, in certain situations, engaging in opposition as a sport. Yeah? Maybe that is due to lack of political maturity on their part, but it all must be nurtured into one cohesive nation that you as government do not have monopoly of good ideas. You must allow other actors to come in to enumerate your failures and positively critique you to move this country
That's what the
forward.
president is saying, that there's no positive critique or alternative solutions.
It's just like
I'm a little
pushing.
hesitant to use the word alternative.
Yes, no, because at the end of the day, really, what is the connotation of the word alternative? We talk about
What's
alternative
that
medicine.
connotation?
Alternative, you're taking
It's
them
a bad thing, you think?
from the margins of actually nation building. You are moving them from the margins of from the center to the margins, because they are not supposed to be integral in this emerging society called Kenya. But when you use the word alternative, I found that really pushing these other forces to the
I want to
margins
talk
of
about
society.
the economy for just a moment. You know, he talked about inflation being under control and the economy expected to grow by 6%, and talked about some of the things that make it easier to do business. Were you happy with that, the overhaul of the Companies Act, the Solvency Bill? He also cited many of those reports we've seen from the World Bank. You know, we're a favorite destination for FDIs in the region.
It's a good statement of intent. Beautiful statement of intent. But there's a disconnect, really. And I truly feel it. If you step out of the studio and go and talk to Mama Mboga, does he feel this change? Do they feel this change? When you go to Makueni, do they feel this change? Yes, there's this economy of people who are affected by the stock exchange. And then they can have those indexes and say, yes, it's going to do well. But then there's this economy below here of us who buys skuma, us who walk to work, us who are trying to balance our meager income vis-a-vis pay as you earn and everything. Has it changed? Do you think they have been positively impacted vis-a-vis the projects that are happening?
So where is the disconnect then, do you think, Kioko, in terms of, because there's certainly big projects, there's the standard gauge railway, there's the electrification
There's two
project.
bats in Mombasa. There are two bats in Mombasa.
Right.
Look at the effort that has been put in Mombasa in terms
So
of...
where is the disconnect between all of these great projects, between the economy growing at 6%, between improving in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, we jumped up 28 places, and the Mama Mboga? What's not happening,
you see,
in your view?
The government has not carried the people towards this agenda. You know, when you establish an
But surely
agenda...
if they can feel it,